Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small business and good stories in general. Welcome to episode 76 of Small Business War Stories. I'm your host, Pablo Fuentes, and today we stopped in Boulder, Colorado, and we did something we have never done before. We interviewed a video game company, but not only any video game company, it is a socially minded video game company. They make games for the greater good. Think about that. Think about all of the attention that gets spent on video games, and oftentimes it's really not focused on anything productive. But Z and his team at Serenity Forge have basically made it their mission to make games that benefit the people who play it and society. It's awesome. So it's a really cool episode. This episode is a part of the Soul of America tour. This is a tour that I did all over the United States. I went from Austin, Texas, all the way up to Bozeman, Montana, and back down through Colorado and it was really Jackson, Wyoming, then Western Colorado and Santa Fe and back to Austin. And as such, it is brought to you by FreshBooks. FreshBooks is our sponsor and our partner for this tour. And FreshBooks is small business bookkeeping software. So if you are spending all your time doing all those tasks that you don't want to do, that you have to do, like billing, invoicing, making sure that you're getting paid and you keep track of all your taxables and things like that, you need FreshBooks because then you can focus on your business. So go check out FreshBooks and go to freshbooks.com/warstories and tell them that you found them on Small Business War Stories. Then they win, we win, everybody wins. And every episode of this podcast is brought to you by Proven. Proven is a company I started, and we are a small business hiring tool, but we're also a small business information hub. So if you go to blog.proven.com, we have tons of articles that will help you run your small business better. And that is where all of the Small Business War Stories episodes live. So go check it out, proven.com and blog.proven.com. And we look forward to working with you to help you hire and help you run your business better. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Small Business War Stories number 76 with Z Yang of Serenity Forge in Boulder, Colorado. And we are live here, and we are in Boulder, Colorado, and I have the pleasure today to sit down with Z Yang, who is the CEO of Serenity Forge.
Hey, how's it going?
Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's good.
Is there another? What did I miss on there?
Well, no, nothing. I mean, it's just my full name is pretty complicated.
How do you say your full name?
It's Jinghua.
Jinghua.
Yeah, it's
Z. That's what you go by.
Exactly.
That's what we'll go with.
Yep, for good reason.
Love it. So you and I met years ago when I was doing a guest lecture at the University of Colorado, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what was that? So that was probably about 3-4 years ago now.
Yeah, that's it's been a while. I think I was still a junior in college at the time.
Yeah. So tell me one of your friends and classmates from the University of Colorado now works at Proven, so that's how we reconnected. But what do you remember from that time? I remember you said that you remembered that when I came and visited and spoke.
Yeah, that was actually super influential. I mean, Alan Jaglenzer always brings in the best speakers, obviously. And I think one of the main things for me as a junior in college at that time is I was really having trouble picking the career path, the path that I believe that I want to go down on, for essentially the rest of my life.
Sure.
So you came in and you talked about the startup strategy, and I think the main thing that really stuck with me was the all-in mentality. I think the story you gave me was when you're doing a startup, you can't. It's called the bacon and egg strategy. You said that if you think about a bacon and egg breakfast, the chicken is just kind of diddly daddling, doing their thing, kind of going in and out.
The chicken's involved in the breakfast.
Right, but the pig, the pig is all in.
The pig's committed. Yeah.
Right. You have to be all in to be successful, and that's what you told me. And as soon as I heard that, I knew what to choose. And I decided to forego my full-time position at the Federal Reserve at the time and decided to start this company and just go all in.
That is amazing. It's really cool to see, that was I didn't get paid for that. I was volunteering my time because of, Professor Jagalinzer, who was one of my professors, is great. And it's cool to see, things that you share like that years down the line making an impact on people. So I'm humbled, and thank you for I guess taking that and making something awesome out of it.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that as well.
Awesome. So let's talk about Serenity Forge. So it's very different. You have a video game company, which is very different from working at the Federal Reserve. But even within video game companies, Serenity Forge is very different from other companies. Mm-hmm. So how is it that Serenity Forge is different from other video game companies?
The main thing about Serenity Forge being different, I think, comes from the idea that we are making games for a reason. Whenever we design a game or create a experience, we're always thinking about why it is that we're doing it, as opposed to just, can we make enough money, or, is this going to have the most amount of players?
Okay.
I like to call this kind of more of a value-driven game design philosophy, which is basically, it means we're creating games for good in a lot of ways.
Love it. Can you give me some examples? So what are some examples of games that you guys have developed and that exemplify that games for good philosophy?
Yeah, totally. A major example comes from a project that we just finished working on maybe last year with a large children's hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. We built 3 floors of video games. So just imagine like this, 20-foot long wall where a kid who's going through chemotherapy between the ages of 5 to 10, often with leukemia, can roll up their wheelchairs in front of that wall of HD displays, put up their arms on their side, and fly around like a bird or eagle inside this world and explore.
Wow.
So that's the one of the 4 games that we did for that hospital. In addition to health, we work with testing standards boards to innovate on their education systems as well, to see what we can do for interactive education, math education especially, and just making tests more fun for a lot of kids.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That sounds incredible. How did you get inspired to start doing this? I mean, did you start programming video games from the time you were a kid? When was the first time you picked up a computer and said, I'm going to make a game?
So I built my first computer when I was 6 years old.
Okay. And there you go. That's a good start.
I programmed my first game when I was 10. Thankfully, both my parents were engineers, electrical engineers, so they got me pretty into it early on. But the truth is, I've never been like the best programmer. Even now, I pretty much don't do much anymore. However, it always interested me quite a bit. What really pushed me into this passion is when I was 18 years old, my first semester in college at the time, I was diagnosed with a severe and chronic fatal disorder that caused me to be hospitalized for 2 years, from when I was 18 till when I was 21.
Wow.
And
well, it wasn't fatal because you're still here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, luckily, I survived the ordeal. However,
what was it? Was it?
So it actually turned out to be the first case in the world. There's the proper term, the full length that it was categorized under was chronic refractory idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, which basically just means that I have very little blood platelets, very little to none, essentially none.
Got it.
And whenever I get a cut, it doesn't stop bleeding, internal or external cut. Bruises.
Oh, so you get no coagulation.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So I can't do any sports. Walking around outside could be dangerous. For 2 years, I couldn't really leave my bed because whenever I walk on the ground, my feet would start bleeding. So it was just really, really difficult time for me.
I bet. So how did that have an impact in what you decided to start doing?
So eventually I did recover, obviously, from that illness. Well, not like fully recover, but enough so that I could go back to school.
Yeah.
The thing was, I played so much video games during those 2 years of hospitalization. a high school student coming out of high school, going to college, and disappearing for 2 years. Most of my friends from high school, pretty much all of them, forgot who I was. Just lose touch with all these people.
Sure.
But by playing
at that age, 2 years seems like an eternity too.
Right, exactly. By playing video games in a hospital room, I started playing, single player games where I am the hero and I'm going around saving the world and feeling super powerful by myself, even though I'm stuck in a bed. Or I could be playing multiplayer games where I met with all these people from around the world, these people who barely speak English, who are able to, check in with me every day, making sure that I'm taking my medicine, making sure that I'm getting rest, and, just made all these new friends as well.
So you felt like you became a part of a community.
Exactly. So after I went back to school and started getting better, I thought back to my days at that time on how these video games were not designed to help me, but they ended up saving my life. So what if we begin designing video games with the intention to help other people? What kind of power can we unlock there?
That's amazing. I got goosebumps right now. So, wow. Okay. So how do you decide what games to make? Like, how do you decide what a game should be about, and how do you test your new ideas?
Video games are all so different, so they all come from different ideas. I think the easiest way to think about it is how will this video game change our society? So many people play games nowadays. The recent ESA data shows that 42% of United States people in the United States play video games every day.
Wow.
That's crazy, right? If you think about it. If you think about how, if someone considers themselves a gamer, you're like, oh, you're one of those weirdos who stays in the basement and just plays games on your computers or whatever. Because so many people play games, you have to approach it with the fact that whatever game you're making, it could be the next thing that really shapes the industry. With that, what kind of consequence do you want to have? Do you want to create a game where people mindlessly knock over bricks on their phones and just waste hours of time? Not to say, those games are important.
Or mow down a bunch of people with a machine gun.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't want to get into something that's so so detailed,
true,
but yeah, it's true. Like when all these kids are playing these games, kids are playing those games even though they're not supposed to, by the current regulations. They are, and it's shaping who they are when they grow up as well. So I guess that's kind of our core belief. How do we want to shape the industry whenever we make a game?
Interesting. So what platform are these games on? Are these on PC games, or are they console games?
Yeah, so we create games for pretty much every platform out there. PCs are primary one, consoles, so Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch recently, mobile as well a little bit, although mobile is probably our least focused area. It's more experimental for us. And lastly, any proprietary hardware, so new hardware that no one's ever seen before, VR, AR areas.
How do you make doing good fun? So one of the things about a lot of these video games is that people say, hey, I like Grand Theft Auto because it's fun, and it's kind of the same reason why you have newspaper headlines, and you open the newspapers every morning and it's like all the terrible things happening in the world. But most people's lives are not like newspaper headlines, mm-hmm. right? So this kind of negativity it kind of sells to some extent. So how do you tackle that, and how do you harness what you're doing, and how do you harness good energy and like power to do good, mm-hmm. and make it fun and interesting?
I think the word fun is a really loaded word. Okay. Fun could be anything, right? You could go to an amusement park and it could be really fun, right? Or you can watch a movie, it could be fun. Read a book, that could be fun. Walking through the park, sitting on a bench, it could be fun to some people. Mm-hmm. So I think the term that we more look at is engagement. How can you make a game that's engaging? And engagement is a lot more specific. There are a lot of non-engaging types of games, again, like mobile experiences where you're just kind of trying to cash out through some free-to-play stuff. But engagement, deep engagement, comes from something that has to tackle someone's core beliefs. If you look at books like 1984, right, or like Uncle Tom's Cabin, these are games that really shaped our society. Are they fun books? they're often pretty painful to read, right? But are they engaging? Absolutely, and people love them. So when we create games, we also look at what type of engagement we want to create. Games like The King's Bird is a game, one of the games we're currently working on.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a game where it's very, very minimal. There's no text or story, or like there is a story, but there's no text at all that you read. However, through playing the game, we are trying to empower the players through the momentum, the freedom of movement. So when you're playing the game and you're witnessing this narrative and just looking at all this setting, that's abandoned by previous generations or whatever it may be, it really engages them in a sense of wonder and a sense of empowerment. So when people play the game, they just feel so much more powerful. They feel like they're so much better.
So what's the game about? Like what does a character do?
Yeah, so The King's Bird is a game inspired a lot by games like Dust Forest and Journey. I'm not sure if you're,
I'm not familiar, but
right.
Educate me. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the game uses the 3 core pillars: freedom, flight, and flow are our 3 core pillars for designing the game. When you talk about the mechanics, it pretty much is like a Mario type thing where you just go from left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and try to beat levels. However, the game utilizes a very unique art style that kind of draws people into this combination of Roman, Mayan, and Vietnamese architecture. Wow. So it tells this really also interesting story about how the main character of the game, Quill, she is a girl that's trapped in a kingdom which is ruled by a tyrant king, and eventually she finds a way to escape from this kingdom and tears down the kingdom's barrier to free its citizens. However, then she realizes that there was a reason why the king was a tyrant, to protect his citizens from the outside. So there's actually this entire narrative.
Those are some deep political themes there.
Right. It's a narrative that challenges the player to think about the duality of freedom and chaos and order and tyranny.
Wow. What's the target age for this game?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it really comes down to whoever wants to. I guess the true target is probably somewhere above 16, below 30. I think people who are above that age group probably don't have too much time to try to go through that kind of hardcore experience.
Cool. And how do you distribute your games? Are your games available online mostly? And
yeah, so we've always been more digital distribution. Recently been exploring some physical, but physical is kind of dying out recently. So in the video game world, it's really hard to make it in the physical world. Just digital. Steam is a huge platform for us, and all the other stores like the Xbox store and PS4 stores.
Interesting. Cool. What are some unique things about the video game industry that maybe most people don't think about when they think about what it's like to run a video game business?
I think the hardest part about the game industry is just how hit-driven it is.
Okay.
People look at a game and they think, "Wow, I could have made that game. It's so easy."
Yeah.
Right. And it made millions of dollars.
Like Angry Birds.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like Flappy Bird, right? Flappy Bird made $50,000 a day, and it's just some kid from Vietnam who has a computer. His mom just washes clothes in the river nearby. This is the type of life that guy used to live. And then he made Flappy Bird, and then now he makes $50,000 per day. Well, used to. People think it's super easy to get into games, so everyone does. And then you have this super crowded industry.
It's kind of like podcasting.
Yeah, you have this super crowded industry of a bunch of people making a ton of different games, right? But only the best game will sell at all. It's kind of like horse racing almost, right? Like the first horse will earn 90% of the profit, while all the rest of the horses will split the remaining 10%. So that always creates a huge discrepancy of the amount of games that you see and the amount of games that are out there and the players who actually talk about games. There's also the pain that comes from a lot of times the games who are out there, like the best games that people are playing, are not actually the best games, or even for the specific demographic they're targeting.
Well, music's the same way too.
Right, and there's just so much problems with discoverability. I mean, one of the for sure things that we always say in the game industry is that for $1 that you spend in design and production, can you guarantee $1 back in game sales? No. The answer is always no. However, for $1 of marketing that you spend in the game, can you guarantee $1 of the game coming back? Yeah, probably. Yeah. Right? So then you create this world where essentially whoever spends the most marketing budget will end up winning in the end. and that becomes a dangerous game.
Interesting. So how do you counteract that? How do you deal with that as a smaller independent developer?
You have to create experiences that other companies are unable to. So one of the I guess theories that we have in our team is the theory of the abandoned genre, and this actually is not just video games. You can say the same thing about movies and books and all that. So if you think about just a video game like a shooter game, whatever, right? These games make tons of money every year. But if you look back to your childhood or whenever you used to play a bunch of these video games that are currently out, you see a lot of those old games that are no longer available, right? These old pixel art games perhaps, or narrative games, they're not really out there anymore. The question is why? Did these large companies decide to stop making these games because they don't make any money? Well, that's not true, because they're big, they're huge now because of those games in the beginning, right? So why did they decide to not make those games anymore? Well, the real answer is, at any given time, they have 100 different games that they could make, right? They pick the ones that make the most amount of money. They pick the top 5, right? Now you have these 95 other games that also make pretty good money, but they chose not to do it because they chose better experiences. And that's where teams like us would come in. I guess in a way you can say that we're like the bottom feeders, right? But the truth is, these are the abandoned games that there are still customers and fans out there, but the large companies just don't care.
Interesting. Actually, there's an interesting analogy in the oil industry where you extract like oil until it's a certain profitability, and then there's an entire second set of companies that buys depleted wells. And then using different techniques extracts more oil out of those same wells. So it's kind of a similar idea.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the game industry, making a game is extremely expensive. Multi-million dollars goes into each project that's currently out there. I mean, ever since 2005, the most recent data I have is 2005, and that's before the Wii even came out. That is, the video game industry was 20 times the size of the film industry in terms of market cap. So that just give you a perspective of how much money goes into games. However, for these large companies to tackle these smaller genres, like these smaller audiences, it'll take them so much more money to create a game like that for the audience compared to someone like us, where we can just, rapid, startup terms very well. But,
prototype, iterate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Iterations on just these small ideas.
Trying different things. And so basically you use your own flexibility as an asset.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
That's a better way to say it.
No. That's great. That's great. So I think a lot of people, it's not exclusive to video games that you have as a small new company. You have large competitors that are very challenging to go up against, right? So what you're saying is that you are using your asset, which is that you are flexible and you are able to iterate faster to find where you can compete and do well against them. And that's I think a principle that's universal. I think that applies to anything. It could apply to knife making. It all has to do with finding what you're good at.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Now you have, based on everything you're saying and what I know about you, a very mission-driven company, right? To you, it's important to make a positive impact on the world. How do you find employees that align with that mission?
It's funny that you asked that question. We are actually currently in the middle of a lot of interviews.
Okay. Wow.
Actually,
I'm glad I was able to get some time.
Yeah, literally on Friday, our programming team just went through 20 or 30 submissions for our programming test.
Okay.
To see whether or not they understand kind of our core mission, core culture, competencies.
Interesting. Hold on. So let me pause it for 1 second. So how do you know? So a programming test, as I understand it, is more of a technical thing. But you can surmise from their technical test whether or not they align with your mission?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I know this is probably kind of weird to think about, but essentially our programming test is to find a small game out there, a very small game, like a normal, like a tic-tac-toe-like game, right? And just give the programmers 3 days to create their own version of that from scratch. And that's a really simple task, right?
I couldn't do it, but yes, I believe you.
for a programmer with a ton of background, it's a simple task. However, it's the execution that you see. did they write their code in a way where it's meant to be worked in a team, or did they write it for themselves? Obviously the cleanliness and efficiency of code is very, very important to us. But other things like, did they add music to the game, right? Did they make it so that there's a saving feature so that when the game gets bigger, we can have, saving or maybe multiplayer or maybe online features, or at least like set up the structure for something like that in the future? Or this is one of my favorite tests. Whenever you beat this tic-tac-toe game, it starts talking back at you, almost like a how kind of thing, where it's like, oh, you could have done better than that. Like the game would like start talking back to the player, right? And all of a sudden, there's a human experience. We're looking for that type of experience, a programmer who's able to create that. I mean, obviously, in the team, a lot of that design comes from artists, narrative writers, etc. But even in our programmers, we'd like to value something like that.
Got it. Do you tell people ahead of time what you're looking for, or do you just give them the blank canvas and then see what they do?
We typically try to give them as blank of a canvas as possible.
Wow.
Obviously, there's going to be things
so if you're interviewing for Serenity Forge, you should listen to this podcast.
Yeah, one of the also fun things, I don't know if it's fun for us. Probably not fun for them, is we never tell them dress code. No dress code, and when they ask, we don't answer, kind of a thing. Like maybe we'll be like, oh yeah, just wear what you feel like you want to wear, and people will show up, and you can kind of see.
You gotta have some interesting stories from that. What's the oddest, weirdest thing that somebody's shown up wearing?
I mean, full suits are like pretty common. That's
for a video game developer.
Yeah, apparently like suit and tie, a lot more common than you would think. More common than I thought, at least. But I think the other side of the spectrum is a little bit more funny. Just the other day, we had a programmer who came in just completely on drugs. Like, he was open about it, and he told.
Oh, he was high on weed?
No, it wasn't weed. It was like something even harder.
Really?
Yeah, and he like told the interviewer Andrew about it. It's like, oh yeah, you should try this stuff, It's just, and he's a super competent. So that's the thing, right? Like, he is probably the most qualified programmer we had the whole time. But he just doesn't care, because that's what he thought the game industry is like. Just come to work high, whatever, do whatever you want.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of ranges of things.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, do you ever feel like you have to make trade-offs between people that are maybe like the more competent, better programmers and your value system here? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I mean, this is our most recent programmer hire, who is actually our lead programmer now, Andy. When we were making that decision, we decided to go with the most competent programmer, and then it ended up being just an amazing choice, obviously, because he's our lead programmer now. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of hidden values as well. Interviews can only tell you so much. You're always going to be taking a risk, no matter what you do. I feel like whenever you hire. And the truth is, if it doesn't work out, it just won't work out, and you go, try to go through the hiring process.
So I presume
again.
You've had that happen before, where it didn't work out.
I mean, you see the size of our team. We're about 10 people right now. Yeah. Throughout our founding, we've had probably over 100, 150 people come through and leave at this point.
Wow.
And it's pretty much all of it was happy.
In how many years?
I started the team back when I was in high school, actually. So many years.
Okay.
Many years, almost 10 years now.
Okay.
But like people come in and come through and leave, and some people stay, and it almost comes down to a numbers game.
So you were doing this while you were in school at CU full time?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So my senior year of college, we had, I think, four to five full time people working at Serenity Forge. That's why I never went to class. So my GPA plummeted at that year. But yeah.
I hear you. Yeah, I started my company during the second year of grad school, and I also didn't have very good grades. Actually, who am I kidding? I never had good grades anyway. So.
Yeah, the way that I saw it, I don't know if your listeners are students or whatever.
There are a lot of small business people, but also a lot of people, maybe students who may be students who are also thinking about starting a company.
Right. Yeah, the way that I saw it for my final year of college is I know I had to withhold my GPA or maintain a GPA for a specific reason, and that is I do want to go to Stanford for an MBA sometime down the road.
You do?
Yeah, that's like one of my life like almost bucket list items. I like to say it a bucket list item because I know I don't really care what I get out of it. I just want to do it for fun.
Okay.
So I thought about it. It's like if I keep my 3.8 GPA, right, and just not do any company stuff. compared to if I can make sure that we lock down this $30K a month deal that's coming in right now, right? And have a first year earning of this much number because of it, even though I was a full-time student in school and dropped my GPA to like a 3.4, 3.2. Which one's going to look better on my application to Stanford for an
Got
MBA?
it.
And I thought about it, and I was like, screw the GPA.
Cool.
I don't need
So
that.
you still want to go to Stanford?
Probably somewhere down the road. It's always hard to fit that somewhere in your life when you're so busy, but I think so. That's definitely one of my
Well,
bucket list.
happy to talk about that anytime you want.
Yeah, definitely.
I still have no idea how I got in, but if I can help, let me
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So what are some of the other odd, wacky things you've seen? I mean, the video game industry has a lot of characters, very creative people, right? So you must have seen some interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, the game industry is very diverse, right? To give you a sense of just diversity, I mean, you see games where it tricks you into to memorizing Bible passages and being Trump supporting, people.
Really? Huh.
And you also see games where it's literally just a socialist propaganda piece, trying to get people to, that are created by, communist leaders from around the world. That's the kind of diversity that you have, which is like not to say either one is good or bad. It's just, it just goes to show the diversity of the industry, because usually it's not like that. Definitely.
And that's become now, it's more democratized now, right? Because if you think about it, 15 years ago, you had to basically be a major developer to be able to put out a game on a console.
Yeah.
Or be like Activision to be like a PC game, like, have a big name game. But now it's been democratized. It's almost like music, where people can like basically anybody can create anything they want. So I'm sure that's opened up Pandora's box for a lot of weird stuff.
Right. And I think it's great. I think it makes it so that anyone can share their message, right, through this medium, which is great. Some of the real weird shit that I've seen. 2 years ago at the Game Developers Conference, there was a game that won some awards where it's literally just a black box and there's a hole and you have to put your tongue inside and you have to lick stuff to control a game, right? Weird stuff.
That is wow. I wish the listeners could see my face right now.
Yeah, there's just weird stuff. And then you have like. For example, one of the games we're working on here right now called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, which is a game about the Dust Bowl era. You play as this character who walk around America during the 1930s as a hobo, and you don't fight like you would, in a normal video game. Instead of fighting, you meet other hobos and you just share stories with them and try to impress them, and that's your combat, right? And once you share enough stories and you build that connection with that character, they open themselves up to you and show you their true forms. And then that becomes a story, and then you can tell that story to other people.
That sounds a lot like this podcast. I'm traveling around America like a hobo with my dog, sharing stories and listening to stories, and people open up.
Right. And I mean, the game is just this entire thing that essentially tells the player that, hey, capitalism, kind of dangerous sometimes, right? Like, in the end of the game, you will die no matter what you do. And it's just a really kind of gruesome, painful, but still, maybe life isn't about living long. Maybe life is about those rich experiences that you have when you talk to people.
Have you read the book The Road?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you gotta read that book. Cormac McCarthy. It's a dark novel, but it's got some interesting parallels to what you just said.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I don't even play video games, but I kind of want to play that game.
Yeah, I can totally show you.
Awesome. What would you say is the number one lesson or piece of advice you would give to people who are thinking about starting their business, thinking about setting out on their own? There's a lot of, kind of romance and romanticized ideas about starting your own business, but it's also tough, and you know that firsthand. So what's some, biggest piece of advice you have?
So the biggest piece of advice that I have didn't come from me, and it came from the person, John Mackey. He's the co-founder of Whole Foods. So when I came across this quote when I was younger, and it really resonated with me. And he said that the mission of Whole Foods very much follows his life philosophy. He says that companies are very much like people, where people need to eat in order to live, just like how companies need profit in order to survive. However, a person doesn't live just to eat food. much like how a company shouldn't survive just to make money. And I think that quote completely defined every choice that I do now. And that is, instead of whenever we make the decision, instead of like how much money could we get out of something, it's always, how much value are we providing to society? What kind of externalities are we having with these things? And the truth is, if you create something that truly impacts society and really changes up the world, the money will come as well. And I think a lot of people don't realize that going to just, the game industry or startups as a whole.
Got it. How long did it take you guys to turn a profit?
I don't think we ever not had a profit.
Yeah, because you
Right.
were selling immediately. Now,
Yeah.
do you ever have cash flow issues because you have, hits and like games that do better than others, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously really scary sometimes. Sometimes we're just kind of clinching on there to try to make it through. I've always been very fiscally conservative. We're always very cautious about spending money. So that's been really nice. Coming from a finance background, that helps a lot. We're not just going around and spending everything and putting all our eggs in one basket. I think Jim Collins, in his book Great by Choice, has a thing where he said that all the greatest companies that are currently around now did one thing, and did many things, but one of the things that they did is that they always made sure that they were so conservative and cautious about their spending that they always made decisions that would not dip them down below the line of bankruptcy, essentially.
Right. So they kept a margin of safety in their cash flow so that
Yeah.
if things got bad for a while, the company didn't die.
Right, exactly. I mean, you hear stories about how, oh yeah, in 2 weeks we would have gone bankrupt, but we released this game and then everything is okay again.
That's what happened to Rovio, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean,
with Angry Birds.
yeah,
I think
Angry Birds.
so.
Yeah, I mean, Angry Birds was their like 53rd game, and they haven't made any money in the previous 52nd. So I'm not surprised. But yeah, for us, the margin of safety is like a year or half a year. So that's always been really good for us, making it really safe, even though we're in a startup phase.
Very cool. Very cool. Can you think of a time when things got real dark and like things went sideways, and what did you do about it?
Times that go dark are typically when we release games. Whenever we release a game, especially in the early days, it never matches what our expectations are for how the game will sell. Because it's such a black box. You never know what's going to drive game sales, and no one really knows nowadays.
Yeah.
However, even with that, we always made sure to be really safe with what we do. And if anything, like honestly, I do want to bring this up. If anything, I'm always concerned if we're too safe. Because there's a reason why we're in a startup situation. We do want to take that risk. So I think being overly safe, maybe it's balancing out the fact that we're taking a huge risk as individuals coming into something like this. So hopefully that balances. But I think the popular feedback that I normally hear from individuals about how we operate is always, you guys are being too safe. You got to, put your resources in there and just get it done,
Yeah.
So
what's your vision? What do you want to do this in 10 years?
That's a good question. It's a good question because that's usually 10 years is usually what I answer. I can't answer anything shorter than that. So I think in 10 years or even beyond, the game industry is going to change drastically. You're already seeing things like Pokemon Go, right? That was a huge phenomenon.
Or playing a game with your tongue in a box.
That too, but I don't know if that's going to catch on that much. So as you see the game industry change over time, you're going to start to see the world evolve to adapt the game strategies. If you look at like Facebook, right, or even MySpace back in the days, number of friends, right, that's essentially a high score. You look at like the number of books that you read on Facebook or Goodreads, right, that's an entire business based on achievements, just like video games usually are. And I think a lot of game designers today are probably going to be society designers tomorrow. A lot of the things that we do right now in our world are very heavily focused on extrinsic value. So if you think about, how does everyone compare success nowadays? You compare if your house is big enough, if you make enough money, what's your job title? Do you have, a beautiful wife and a white picket fence and all these, whatever, external things.
Some people, yeah.
Right? However, video games are able to provide something that people can feel fulfilled even if they don't have that. There was a story of a investment banker. He's an investment banker, made millions every month, like they usually do. And he one day he discovered the Apple II computer and how there's breakout, the little game with the little paddle, and you try to hit the balls back and forth to try to break the bricks on the wall there. So he started playing that game, and he got so addicted because he felt so good about himself. He decided to quit his job to play this game full time just for fun at home. His wife was pissed, and he kept on playing it for about 2 months straight. He did nothing but play this game. And eventually he got a full score, perfect score. There's no way that you can get a higher score in this game than what he did. Then he turned off the computer, and then he turned around and told his wife that was the most fulfilling moment that he's ever felt in his life. And
wow. I'm not sure his wife loved that. But.
Right? And you're thinking about this investment banker who makes millions of dollars per month, which is everyone's dream to have, right? But that moment is his favorite moment in his life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and just think about how powerful that is for video games, how video games could provide so much to people's just daily lives.
I think a lot of experiences are like that. I mean, for me, I had a past life in the finance world, and the no money I made compares to the feeling of playing music with people, like on a porch, and sharing that language and being able to, kind of share your soul. So yeah, I think there's a lot to, experiences that go beyond the monetary. For
yeah,
sure.
Totally. Yeah. So I guess the short answer is in 10 years, I think a lot of these intrinsic values that video games provide, created by these game designers, will transfer into our daily lives, creating things like, saving energy for good and being able to, save energy and compete with your friends on how much you can save, the environment and, stuff like that.
That's amazing. So tomorrow's game designers will be society designers. How do you see, so are you where'd you grow up?
I was born in China.
Okay.
I came here when I was 10 though.
And to Colorado?
Yeah, Boulder.
Boulder. Okay, so you like living in Boulder.
Yeah.
Why not move to a major city?
So when we first started the team, we actually heavily considered it. We talked about moving to San Francisco for 2 straight years before we finally decided that we can't, and we just decided to stay here. I think, I don't know about the reason for other people on our team, but for me, I kind of wanted to adopt the Warren Buffett strategy, where instead of going somewhere and chasing after someone else's dreams and try to build whatever it is that they have, just build your own, right? Just stay here and establish your own. From a business standpoint, obviously, on a practical standpoint, we are one of the largest game development companies in the state, third, fourth, maybe, which is crazy, considering how small we are. So that does help a lot because essentially all the local business, however small there is, will funnel to us. But on the more, passion-driven part of the decision, it does feel like we are able to build our own brand as in the feeling of what video games stand for, so that we don't have to go somewhere and be dominated by large companies that are just making shooter games. We just have to try to become shooter game companies as well, because that's the only thing that works.
Interesting. And you probably get some self-selecting people who want to work here too, who want to share your values and build. One of the things I've been finding a lot across the country is people want to move back to maybe smaller places and have a sense of community and identity that maybe is lost in some of these bigger cities, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, every large city out there has its own identity, like you said. And again, we just wanted to build our own.
You're also saving a lot on taxes by living here instead of San Francisco.
Yeah, a lot of taxes and rent. Yeah.
Yeah, rent's expensive. Rent's expensive. Cool. So you see yourself staying here in Colorado for the long run?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be moving unless if a giant external force happens.
Yeah. Well, the mountains are beautiful here.
Yep.
That's awesome. Love it. Where can people find you if people are interested in learning more about Serenity Forge? What are your website? If somebody's interested in your games, how do they find them?
Yeah, so our website is serenityforge.com. Really straightforward. We're pretty active on Twitter and Facebook, so just Facebook/Serenity Forge and Twitter @Serenity Forge. Let's see, what else? So on Steam, you can also find us, I believe, on the Serenity Forge page. You can just go ahead and find all our games there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you just search that in the other stores,
awesome.
you'll find
it. Before we sign off, what's the origin of the name? It's a beautiful name.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started the team, it's a passionate team. All of us are always arguing and fighting with each other regarding design decisions. And I'm sure you feel the same way when you work on a song or something like that.
Sure.
So eventually one day we realized that hey, like, why are we fighting with each other? Shouldn't we just we're here because we're all passionate and we realize that. Shouldn't we just, be peaceful with each other and, love each other and create games that we're all passionate for instead of just fighting over small details like that? So in the future, we wanted to forge Serenity. So that's kind of how it began.
Beautiful. Well, Z Yang, it's been an honor to have you on the show. I'm glad that whatever small piece of advice I gave you years ago had any sort of usefulness. It seems like you're already well on your way. So you have taught me more today than I could possibly have ever taught you. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on Small Business War Stories.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Small Business War Stories. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend, or you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our blog at blog.proven.com. If you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear it. Please email us at podcast@proven.com. See you next time. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.